The next part of this chapter talks about bankruptcy and what companies would have to deal with if that happened. Okay, so bankruptcy, not a good thing, but you can emerge from it. And most of the time, it's a one-way trip. Companies finish, but really, what it's called it's called bankruptcy protection. And what that does is it gives the company some protection from its creditors, and it essentially allows time to repay. Okay, so the company has to say, we got a whole bunch of people wanting their debts right now. We can't pay them all, but we can pay them over a certain amount of time. And if you convince the court and you file for bankruptcy protection, then you get a chance to do that. Okay, so what are the causes of bankruptcy? The main cause, it's never equity. It's always going to be debt. Okay, and it's going to be when you have missed payments on debt. Okay, so we'll talk about covenants and restrictions in a bit, but this is the biggest one. Okay, so you have to be able to pay the principal whenever it's due, whether it's in bonds, it's usually every 6 months, and a bank loan, it may be monthly, and also the interest when it's due. You miss a debt payment, you can be forced to go into bankruptcy. And it can be voluntary. Okay, and why would a company go voluntarily into bankruptcy? It's basically to get extra time. Okay, so as I mentioned before, you might have a whole bunch of money coming in, and then everyone is wanting to be paid right now, or was supposed to be paid right now. If you could just get some extra time, you might be able to get out of this, and bankruptcy would allow you to do that. And the text also talks about what are the costs of bankruptcy. So there's direct and there's indirect. And we'll start with direct. This is basically anything that you're going to be writing a check for or has an actual direct cash flow implication. Things like legal and accounting fees. So you have to pay lawyers and accountants when you're going through this process. You could end up with situations where you're liquidating assets. So we're sort of being forced to sell some things, and it'll generate some cash, but there's costs associated with that. Might not have been the best time to sell them, and there could be loss of write-offs. Okay, so you could have had a whole bunch of tax write-offs that you were going to use, and now they're gone because the company's in bankruptcy and no longer needs them. The indirect costs are often the bigger portion of what's going to have an impact on a company. This would be things like suppliers not giving credit. Okay, so you've already got a situation where a company's having a cash flow problem, and now suppliers don't want to give you any extra credit. They want you to pay cash up front because they don't think you're going to be able to pay them at the end of the payment period. The other thing is customers can stop buying product. Okay, so a good example of this is General Motors for both of those. In 2008, when rumors started going around with them getting bankrupt, essentially what happened is suppliers said, if you want us to ship the tires over to you, pay us up front. Causes a cash flow problem. And customers who are ready to buy a car would probably say, well, this dealership and warranty won't be around 2 years from now, so why don't I buy something else? And then there's something called agency costs. And this is essentially a scenario where you could say that shareholders and debt holders are acting differently. Okay, so normally in a company, you would think that the same, let me just clear out my screen here. You would think that the same objective would be for whether you're a shareholder or whether you're somebody that's loaned the company money. You want the company to do well and continue to grow. But here's an example of where that would change. Let's suppose you had a company with a very simple scenario where their assets, and I could say assets are cash. They've got $1,000 in cash. They owe the bank $1,000. So what's the value of the equity in this company? Really nothing. There's no net worth. Now, if they wound up, the bank would be paid. Everyone's happy, but not the shareholders. The shareholders would be like lost whatever investment they made. So they would probably say, why don't we just take the $1,000 cash and put it in some cryptocurrency, or take it to a casino and gamble it if you could. If it doubles, then you pay the debt holders back and the equity shareholders get something. And if it doesn't, then the shareholders are no worse off, but the debt holders are worse off. So that's why a debt holder would probably try to take you into bankruptcy protection as quickly as they could. The process essentially for this, once you're in bankruptcy, is you do things like you sell assets in a company. You would reduce your capital spending. And so you shouldn't be making large projects or anything like that when you're having cash flow problems. And then you would renegotiate with banks. And essentially, you would say things like, we can't repay everything right now. How about you do something like you could convert your debt to equity? And normally a bank would say, forget it, you owe us cash, pay us the cash. But if they think you're going bankrupt, they might think, it's better than nothing. We won't really get much. And if none of that's really working, then you would file for bankruptcy. And that bankruptcy protection would give you some extra time.